Hello, and welcome to Fresh Blood, a podcast about killing it in the age of ageism, where we prove that new blood does not necessarily equal young blood. Here to discuss what it takes to have continued success through life, I'll be your host, Jolie Downs. With over 20 years of executive recruiting experience, I've learned how much we can grow and be inspired by other people's stories. I'm excited to share that with you here on Fresh Blood. Today, we are speaking with Kim Olver. Kim spent almost 2 decades as a director of training and development for a family care center before deciding to quit her job 17 years ago, and she has since built her own speaking and coaching business. Since she started her own business, she has traveled the world speaking. While her friends are making plans for retirement, Kim is thriving in her career and plans to keep going well into her 90s. It is so inspiring to feel such joy in what you do. Kim, please tell us more about your story.
I do plan to keep working till I'm 90 because I love what I do. I just hope people keep hiring me until I'm 90. So my story, I think, I don't know how far back you want me to go, but I'll go back to 38. When I was 38, my husband died. And it was very sad. He was only 37. He had leukemia, and we had 2 sons. And they were teenagers at the time, 13 and 15. So that was challenging, and it pretty much knocked me for a loop, to be fair. And then trying to parent 2 bullheaded, testosterone-driven teenage boys to be responsible adults without that partner that was the stabilizing influence was really challenging.
Oh, lady, I feel you there. I have those 2 testosterone-filled boys right now. I can't imagine. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay. So I had about 5 years after my husband died to continue parenting through high school. My oldest son, in the meantime, had gone off to college. And my younger son, much to my dismay, I'll say, wanted to join the army and go fight in Iraq. And you can imagine, after losing your husband, the last thing you want is for your baby to go to Iraq where they play with explosives and guns and he could be killed. So I wasn't exactly happy about that, but I also knew that I couldn't stop him from doing what he really wanted to do. I didn't want to stop him. Not that I could have if I wanted to anyway.
Did you try out of curiosity?
I didn't. I simply asked him to do one favor. There was a military movie out at that time. I think it might have been Full Metal Jacket, that didn't necessarily glorify being in the service. It was more realistic. And I made him promise he would watch that. And if he still wanted to join, he could, I would take him, because it was a week before his 18th birthday. So he needed my signature to get signed in. And I could have said no, but I knew full well in a week's time he was going to sign himself in anyway. And I believe now in hindsight, looking back, he was looking for that structure that the Army provided, because that's what his dad gave him. And I was more the loosey-goosey parent that, I was easygoing and my boundaries are pretty flexible. And he was looking for that hard and fast line. And I just didn't know how to draw that line. And so he found it in the Army, and he did 2 tours in Iraq, and I lived through it, and so did he. So that's the good news.
How did you live through it? Because I know that's got to be hard, and I'm sure a lot of people listening have to deal with that too.
Well, the main way that I lived through it was to tell myself that this was his life to live, and that I would not want him to be doing a job that he hated until he was, 90 like me, doing a job that he hated because his mommy wanted him to be safe. He from the time he was a young boy was an adrenaline junkie. He was my kid that was jumping out of trees, breaking bones in sports. And, that's who he is. And even now he's out of the service, but he's a CO at a prison. So he is always going to be somebody that is in harm's way. That's just his makeup. And I think the best thing we can do for our children when they become adults is to let them be who they are without our interference, and just accept them and love them anyway, and find ways to cope with your own insecurities and fears. So I would say the biggest thing I did to help me cope through that time was to turn off my television. I know that sounds really crazy, but at that time, there were all those scrolling CNN headlines at the bottom of the television screen, no matter what you were watching, that told you about battles in Fallujah and, Baghdad being bombed and all of that. And I didn't want to know about that unless I needed to know. And if I needed to know, I knew the army would find me and they would tell me whatever they had to tell me. So that helped me a lot. And I had a cell phone, of course, where I was constantly listening for a ring and finding a number that I didn't recognize, because at that time it was so early on. He had to wait in line to make a phone call from one of their satellite phones. And it was nerve wracking thinking that I might miss a call from him. That just was like the worst thing in the world that could possibly happen. So as I was speaking, I would often tell my audience, now I have my phone and it's on purpose. And if it rings, I'm going to excuse myself for about 5 minutes because that's my son calling from Iraq. And nobody had a problem with that.
No. Oh, wow. That was really powerful what you just said. Honestly, I feel like I needed to hear that message also about dealing with your children as they grow up. So thank you. And we got a little off track there. So please continue with your story.
So when my youngest son, went to basic training, I left where I lived. I tell a joke to parents who have trouble with their kids coming home and staying there. The kids that have $1 million college bills and they come home to live for a while. I say, just move, leave no forwarding address. They can't come home. Of course, I'm kidding, but that is actually what I did. I moved. My kids didn't care about my address; they just wanted my cell phone number. So. And I didn't sell my house. Kyle lived in my house in between deployments, and everything was good. And I kept going back. I moved from Pennsylvania to Chicago. So I left my job at the foster care agency. It was a fine job. I liked it. But with my husband and my children, we lived on a dirt road in northeast rural Pennsylvania. And if you live in a rural area, it's a beautiful place to raise your children. I wouldn't trade that for the world. But if you find yourself single, if you find yourself single and looking for perhaps a new partner in life, being in a rural area is not the greatest thing, because most of the people that I knew my age were married. And I wasn't interested in having a married person's attention. So I wanted to move to a more urban area, and also I thought the business opportunities would be greater. So I moved from Northeast Pennsylvania to Chicago, where I knew one other person, and we were going to start a business together, a speaking business. We were both speakers. We both were trained in something called choice theory psychology, and we did choice theory training. We also did diversity training together. The funny thing was, by the time I got to Chicago, he had already taken a full-time job and wasn't working on his own anymore. So we never did work together in that full-time kind of way. But we have done some part-time things together. And I started my own coaching business. And I took about a year to figure out just what the heck is coaching, because it was relatively new then. And I'm a counselor by education. So I was already working with people in a helping professional way. So it was hard for me to figure out the difference between counseling and coaching. And I finally figured it out. That's the good news. And I started my own coaching school. So I have a board certified coaching school where I train people to become coaches like myself. I also continue to teach choice theory training. And I have individual clients in coaching, and I create a lot of information products. So I have a lot of ebooks and courses and things like that on my website.
So tell me, you've done a lot in your time, and I'm actually really curious because when you made this move, I know it was a big transition in your life. Your husband had died, your kids were growing up. You made this move. When you made the move, did you know that you wanted to go into coaching when you made the move, or was it something that I'm wondering if it was something that you had been thinking about, or if it's popped up in that transition time for you?
I knew I wanted to do coaching. I guess Life is a series of events that I believe nudge you in the general direction you were meant to go. And if you pay attention to those nudges and you don't resist them, then you can get to where you're supposed to go sooner. And I had some nudges. So I had a woman that I worked with at the foster care agency who I adored. She was my manager, and I would have worked for her until retirement. But she ended up leaving the company, and the new person that took her place, I really didn't want to be working for. So that was a big catalyst in having me leave my job. I also met a man during that time who was running another nonprofit organization, and he wanted me to come work for him. I didn't want to work for anybody else. I was pretty sure I wanted to be my own boss. And he was aspiring to be a coach. So he talked to me a lot about coaching, and I got interested in coaching. So knowing him is how I became interested in coaching. And he never went on to be a coach, but I went on to be a coach. And it just seemed like all of that cumulative things is what nudged me in this direction. I also had a dad who was an entrepreneur. He had several businesses throughout my life with him. And I think that's why I thought that I could do it. Some people think, oh, I couldn't open my own business. Well, why not? And you could. It just depends on whether you want to and if you can tolerate the uncertainty and sometimes not knowing how much money is going to be in your bank account. That can be hard for some people. I'm okay with that. I can handle uncertainty. So I think having your own business isn't for everybody, for sure, but you can do it if you really want to, and you're operating in what I call your passion. And I have many passions, but it's all related to helping people. So one of the things I do in my business is I'm a speaker for yellow ribbon events, which are events that we hold for our armed services before and after a deployment. And so I started doing that when Kyle was on his second deployment, and it was my way of giving back and helping, even though, I'm not going to be in the trenches anywhere. Nobody would want me in the trenches, but I can help you when you get back with your adjustment. And I can prepare families before you go for being alone for a year sometimes. I also do my, the coaching school that I talked about. Another area that I'm really active in right now is Black Lives Matter. And I do know that all lives matter. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Black Lives Matter more, but I'm saying we really can't say all lives matter until we can say that Black Lives Matter. And so I've been doing a lot of work in the field of diversity. That's the work that my friend and I, that I moved to Chicago to do work with, is one of the things that we write about in our book. We wrote a book called Leveraging Diversity at Work, and we do diversity training. So I've been doing some of that recently. I've recently been asked to create a webinar series for law enforcement and help them with some of the challenges that they have in the area of police, over policing, police brutality, and things like that in the area of, the communities of color. And I'm big on helping people with relationships. So I like to help people when they're in a couple relationship, or if they're having struggles with parenting. And another thing that's really important to me, and it was the subject of my last book, Choosing Me Now, is about that all important relationship that we have with ourselves that most of us don't even pay attention to. We don't even think about. But I think it's super important to have a healthy, loving relationship with yourself if you expect to have any kind of relationship with other people.
Oh, yeah. And that's something that too many people don't pay any attention to. I agree. You just dropped a lot of great things there, actually. So, all along there. Now, you've obviously done quite a bit, and you know a lot about a lot of different topics. So, what would you, when you reflect on all the things that you've done, what would you say has been one of your greatest successes, and what did you learn from it?
That's a really good question. I would have to say that one of my greatest successes was in 2010. I mentioned that I learned something called choice theory psychology. It was a type of psychology founded by a man named Dr. William Glasser. And Dr. Glasser was retiring and was looking for someone to be the director of his organization. And he asked me if I would do that. And I was so flattered and honored. And there wasn't a single thought in my head that I could possibly say no, because I felt that this person who created choice theory psychology is the person that changed the whole trajectory of my life. I learned it when I was 27 and working for the foster care agency. And it helped me raise my children by myself. It helped me be a better partner to my husband. And it's helped me deal with some really challenging things, like Kyle being deployed to Iraq twice. And I didn't tell you this, Jolie, but once a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I was in Arizona and I was in a hot air balloon accident where I broke both my ankles.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, it was quite interesting. I was in a wheelchair for a couple of months. They thought I'd be in a wheelchair for about 4 months, but I was bound and determined that that was not going to be me. And I worked hard. And, in 2 months' time, I was out of the chair and able to go back to speaking. It was interesting for sure. And I still, I don't have any residual effects. I do have metal in one of my ankles. The other one they didn't have to operate on. But choice theory is what got me through all of those things. So,
So how did it help get you through?
well, it's just the way that you think about things, right? So, choice theory is an explanation of how and why people do what they do. And from that basic understanding, I've developed this process that I call mental freedom. And it's about operationally using choice theory in your life. And one of the biggest things I'll say is I can ask two questions of people, and the responses are predictable. So the first question is, whose behavior can you control? And everybody knows the answer to that. Everybody knows they can only control their own behavior. But then I ask the question, whose behavior do you spend all your time, energy, and attention trying to control all day long? And the response usually is a nervous giggle, because people know that they're controlling everybody else's behavior.
Yeah, I wanted to giggle too. Yeah.
Am I talking to you, Jolie?
Yeah. I can relate.
So can everybody, including me, right? I mean, I didn't start knowing how to do this. So it's been a lifetime practice, is what I would call it. It's like a yoga practice or a meditation practice. It's a new way of being in the world. So people make the choices that they make and they do the things that they do for one reason. And so from that, I've developed this thing I call the unconditional trust challenge, and it's part of mental freedom. So the unconditional trust challenge is you can trust every single person you know, and even the ones you don't know, to do one thing. The problem is we try to trust people to be the person we want them to be instead of the person that they really are. And when we say, somebody broke trust with us, what we're really saying is they didn't meet my expectations. They didn't do what they were supposed to do, what you thought they were supposed to do. So the unconditional trust challenge is this. You can trust everybody that you know, and even the ones you don't, to, in any given moment in time, make their best decision, their best behavior to get what they want in that moment. And that's it. Everybody's doing that. And some people will think, well, there's things I do all the time that I don't really want to do. That doesn't feel like I'm making my best decision to do what I want. But if you dig underneath that, you find that it really is. So let's pretend that the thing that you do that you really don't want to do is go visit your aging, ailing aunt who does nothing but complain all the time. Well, you go to do that because you have a vision of the person that you are. And in your vision of yourself, you're a kind, caring, compassionate human. And part of being that person means that every now and then you have to bite the bullet and go spend time with the aunt who's going to complain and zap your energy in the afternoon. So you are doing it to get what you want in that moment, which is to be congruent with how you see yourself. So if we recognize that that's true, not only for ourselves, but for everyone else, there's no reason to be angry with people. There's no reason to feel disappointed. You just recognize this is a person I care about, and they made the best decision they knew at that time to get what they wanted. You don't have to be mad about it. If you care about them, that's actually what you would want them to do. Sometimes when somebody does something that to get what they want, it can hurt us because it's not what we wanted them to want. And when that happens, you have to decide. You have some hard things to think about. Do you want to stay in relationship with this person? Do you need to create some boundaries with this person to protect yourself? Or do you want to completely forgive and move on and stay completely involved? You have to decide because they've shown you who they are, and you need to make a decision about what you think about that. It's all about you. It's not about the other person. And so that's a little bit about how to gain some mental freedom in your life. There's other ways, but that's one thing.
I find that so powerful and applicable in every aspect of life. I can't, my mind is spinning a little bit because I find that incredibly, incredibly helpful to apply. And what you said is dead on. It's not that people are abusing your trust. It's that they are not meeting the expectations that you have for them. That's
That's right.
wow. It gives me some things to think about, particularly with my teenagers. So thank you, Kim.
You can give your teenager my email address and tell him or her to thank me later.
That was incredibly powerful, what just came from that one question. So let's flip it. What about a time that you struggled with something, an obstacle or a failure or mistake? Can you tell us about a time like that and what you learned from it?
You don't have enough time on this podcast to hear about all the mistakes I've made. But you know what? I don't think of them as mistakes. So that's the difference. So there's been things that have happened that didn't turn out the way I would have liked them to. But I always tell my clients, if you can forgive yourself for the so-called mistakes by remembering that you did the best you knew at that point in time to get what you wanted, right? It was the best you knew to do. If you knew a better way, you would have done it. So forgive yourself and look at the situation to try to see what you can learn from it. So in every situation, I'll share one situation. It's incredibly personal and painful, but there's a good ending to the story. So after my husband died, Valentine's Day was probably the worst holiday for me. Because you have family around for all the other holidays, but Valentine's Day, all you have to do is listen to the month preceding that holiday, and you hear, "Take the one you love, buy the one you love," and I'm sitting home feeling sorry for myself, thinking nobody loves me. And so Valentine's Day would come and go, and it would be a very sad day for me. I would feel sorry for myself, and I'd have a miserable day. And that happened 2 or 3 years after my husband died until I finally said, this is ridiculous. Why am I doing this to myself? Because that's another thing about mental freedom is you come to understand when you study mental freedom that most of your misery is self-created. So I'm asking, why am I doing this to myself? So one of the things I know that's an anecdote, or not an anecdote, an antidote for almost every painful emotion you can be experiencing is gratitude. And so I decided that on the next Valentine's Day, which was coming up in about a week, I was going to sit down and write thank you notes to all the people in my life that helped me with my 2 sons after my husband died. And there were many. I mean, I wrote over 200 thank you notes that day. I had a stack. And I just kept writing and writing, and I'd write to one and I'd think of somebody else and I'd write to them. And they were relatives, there were teachers, there were coaches, there were family friends. There were just so many people. And it might have been one little thing that they did that I remembered, or it might have been a pattern of behavior that they had. And I wrote those notes for me, but I was truly amazed at what those notes did for the people that I sent them to. I heard from so many people in great, respect and gratitude for having gotten that note. And some people said, I really needed to hear that day. But it helped me learn that I don't have to feel sorry for myself. And I really have nothing to feel sorry for. I have a wonderful life. And I could, if I wanted to, sit down and look at all the horrible things that have happened in my life and all the things that I don't like. And I could focus on all the mistakes I've made, because there sure have been some of those. But if I focus instead on the things that I have instead of the things I don't, and I focus on the things I can do instead of the things that I can't, then I'm going to feel like I won the lottery every day. And I'll be able to be happy for all the things that have happened in my life, even the painful things, because another part of mental freedom is when bad things happen. If you were to give that bad thing a number, like a 0 to 100 number of how painful it is, I'm here to tell you that just like the periodic table of elements with the same number of protons as electrons, the same positive and negative charge, our experiences are the same. We have equal positive and negative charge in everything that happens to us. But because our brains are hardwired for negativity, we only look at the painful stuff and we don't even know there is a positive side. So part of mental freedom is when you're having a painful experience, you don't have to wait for hindsight to find the positive in it. You can start looking right away. You can say, "Ooh, I don't like this. This feels really icky. Wait a minute, there must be something good here." And you look, and I call it the glow. You want to look for the glow in the painful situations. And the glow stands for gifts, lessons, opportunities, and wisdom. Yeah. And the lessons and wisdom, people will ask me, how are they different? Well, lessons are the things you learn, and wisdom is the ways it's changed you for the better.
Oh, so good. Yeah, you just brought tears to my eyes. You filled up my heart with everything you just said there. It was so beautiful. And right on. Gratitude changes everything. And you're right. We can all spend time looking at the things that are missing, the things that have gone wrong, the things we've failed at, and we can take ourselves down into spiral by doing that. Or we can focus on the things that we are grateful for, the things that are going right, the things that are beautiful around us. And that makes all the difference. I also loved what you said about forgiveness, because I find forgiveness to be an incredibly powerful tool, particularly when you use it on yourself. And I didn't start doing that till later in my life. And once I did, it completely changed everything. So not only is forgiveness important to other people, but it is important for yourself as well. Um, you know, since you have been, these past 17 years, it seems that you've just thrived in this new realm that you've been doing. What do you believe is key to continued success in life?
I think that for me, and maybe for others, the number one thing for continued success is relevance. You need to stay relevant. I'm going to be 60 next month, and I'm so grateful that I have 8 little grandbabies in my world, because they range in age from 2 to 13. And so I'm getting firsthand up close and personal knowledge of Generation Z. And I have some nieces who are in Generation Y, and I have some children who are in X. And, it's just about staying current and relevant. You have to have examples that people today can relate to. You need to stay up to, up to snuff on technology and the things that are happening in the world around you, because if you stay relevant, people will continue to want to hear what you have to say. They will find, that you bring value to whatever situation you're coming to. So I think being relevant, and I would also say believing that you can. That's the other thing. We have to believe in ourselves and believe in our own success, and to continue to grow and learn. You're never too old to learn. I'm taking a marketing course right now, and I'm also studying at Cornell for diversity and inclusion certificate. Yeah, it's just keep learning. When I was younger, they tried to tell us that, you don't really learn much past 5 years old. It's like crazy to think that that's true. Now we know the brain has great learning capacity and it never stops. So, don't stop learning, don't stop growing. What is it that you need to learn? And people would say, "Oh, I'm too old to do that." And it's like, you're going to be the same age whether you learn something new or not. So you might as well spend that time learning something new because you're going to get older anyway.
Exactly. And how great is learning something new? It just fires all those neurons. It makes you excited. There's, I love learning new things. It's one of my favorite things in life. You have great advice. I have you ever dealt with your coaching in your coaching profession with people who were struggling to find their right next role?
Oh, yeah, I do a lot of that. I write about that in Choosing Me Now. And I think that a lot of it is going back in time instead of forward and trying to remember when you were a child, what were the things that really fired you up? When we were children, we were enthusiastic about things. And there were things that you loved as a child that maybe you were talked out of or told, you can't make a living doing that. Maybe you loved animals and you wanted to be a veterinarian. Most little kids have that aspiration. And parents have a big influence, teachers have a big influence at trying to tell us what box we have to fit in instead of allowing us the freedom to explore those things. Maybe you don't end up being a veterinarian, but maybe you work at a pet store or something. You got to incorporate the things that make you happy and bring you joy into the work that you do, or you're going to hate going to work every day. And I don't want anybody to hate going to work every day. You spend too much time there.
Did you ever deal with someone who was struggling in the second half of their life?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because a lot of people have jobs that they they kind of suffer through. They're those 20-year jobs where you can retire at 20, 20 years, and then you're still young. You're still like 40 something and you're thinking, well, now what do I do with the rest of my life? Because you're not ready to retire. And people have a struggle with that. And I think you can do whatever you want to do. I had a gift from my father. I was born in 1960, and that was a time when little girls were told they could be one of three things, right? Well, four. You could be a mother, a secretary, a teacher, or a nurse. Those were really your options. But my dad told me that I could be anything I wanted to be, and I believed him. And I became a counselor, which is, a female dominated profession, but I didn't shortchange myself at all because that's exactly what I wanted to be. I knew in fifth grade that I was going to be some kind of a helping professional. I was the counselor of my fifth grade class, and sometimes sixth and seventh grade too. Kids who were a year or two older than me would call me up for advice. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I knew that I helped people feel better. And it was what I was born to do this. So I never really took a detour, if you will, but when I was when I was in high school, I thought about being a math teacher because I'm good in math. And I thought about being a missionary because I was very spiritual, but those paths weren't for me. I really needed to follow the helping professional path. And I had many people try to talk me out of it. My mother, my guidance counselor, an advisor at school, they all said, you're not going to make any money as a counselor. And I remember saying to them, there's more important things than money. Like that is not what drives me. But now if, people could look, if those people could see the money that I make now, even though money is not my priority by any means, but I make a very good living doing what I love because I didn't listen to people tell me that I couldn't.
That's fantastic. And you knew at that age what you wanted to do, which is really, that's a very strong personality. Yeah.
I know it's weird, but it's true.
I think it's great. I mean, not everyone knows that deep down, but the fact that you did and you stuck with it and you didn't let people take you off your path. That's the message that we all need to hear. And look at where it got you. So that's fantastic. This has been Kim. You have given me so much. It's just been truth bomb after truth bomb, and I've absolutely loved it. Are there any last bits of advice that you'd like to share? Anything I haven't asked or covered?
Well, there's a lot. Let me just say that I am currently working on trying to get mental freedom to become an evidence-based practice. So I'm running short coaching groups on mental freedom. So if anyone listening would like to take my mental freedom course, it's a 6-week, 2-hour group coaching. And we spread that out over 11 weeks. So it's like every other week. And if you're interested, there's no obligation at this point just to get on a waiting list. And then we'll try to find a day and time that works for people. But to get on the waiting list, you go to, let me see if I get the URL right. It's https:// and then there's 3 capital letters, M, F as in Frank, C as in Charlie, and then OACHING, lowercase. So it's capital M, capital F, capital C, and then OACHING. And that should take you to the wait list page for Mental Freedom. If you're interested, I'd love to have anybody that thinks they'd like to get a piece of some mental freedom. It's a great thing to have.
Yeah, that sounds like an incredible program that would be amazingly beneficial. We'll add that link to the show notes as well. So if anyone wants to go and check that out, they can find it there too. So thank you so much for your time, Kim. This was absolutely wonderful.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You guys, Kim shared such great life lessons. I kept finding myself getting lost in her words and forgetting that I'm supposed to be asking the questions. I was so saddened to hear about her husband's passing at such a young age. And left to raise 2 teenage boys alone, I can only imagine the road she traveled to get through that time. It must have been so difficult. I really found myself in awe of the wisdom that she shared with us coming out of this experience. She talked about the difficulties of her son signing up for 2 Army tours in Iraq. I know the reaction I would have had if my son told me this news, and I found Kim's personal response to be one of incredible grace and power. She left me feeling very reflective. She didn't try to stop him from doing what he really wanted to do. Before this conversation, I would have absolutely done my best to talk my child out of it, but she knew that this was his life to live and that he needed to make his own choices. She advises us to let our kids be who they are without interference and accept and love them just as they are. We must find our own way to deal with our own insecurities and fears. I admit that sometimes I do want my son to make a decision because mommy said. And Kim is right. This is not how the world works. She was so insightful and gave me much to think about. When having to deal with her own son fighting 2 tours overseas, she dealt with this in the best way possible. She turned off the TV. So simple, so powerful, and so relevant to today. Might I suggest we all start turning off our own TVs and social media with much more regularity. It makes me think of the story that ironically is going around social media about an 87-year-old man who responds to the question that 2020 must be especially challenging to him. He replies with, "No, I learned a long time ago to not see the world through the printed headlines. I see the world through the people around me. I see the world with the realization that we love big. Therefore, I choose to write my own headlines. Husband loves wife today. Family drops everything to come to grandma's bedside. Old man makes new friend." Let's all start creating our own daily headline, shall we? Kim shared that she believes life nudges you in the direction you need to go, and I completely agree with her. It's just that we're so wrapped up in what we think we know that we often miss the nudge. It's a reminder to pay attention to life's nudges and don't resist them. The messages are there for a reason. She talked about how the most important relationship that we have is with ourselves. How true this is. We should all be our very own best friend. It's important to have a healthy, loving relationship with yourself if you want to have healthy relationships with other people. How have you been treating yourself? What kind of self-talk do you engage in each day? Are you treating yourself like a trusted friend, or do you talk to yourself in a way you would never talk to anyone else? Start shining the light on where you are fortunate, taking inventory of all the things that you're grateful for about yourself. I challenge you to wake up every morning and list 3 things that you appreciate about yourself. Make them different each day. Repeat every day. And remember, you are an unrepeatable miracle. When Kim decided to make a move to Chicago, she had a plan in place to start a business with the one person she knew, and that plan ended up falling through. But Kim did not let that sway her. She followed her passion and she developed her own coaching business. She brought forth choice theory psychology, which is a powerful thought process that changed her own life. It helped her transform her difficult times, and now she helps her clients do the same while training others on how to continue spreading the word. She's changing the world one mind at a time. I loved her mental freedom model. Using this choice theory in your life to change the way you walk through the world was so powerful. It was such a simple, straightforward, and freeing way to look at everything around you. She asked us 2 quick questions. Whose behavior can you control? And whose behavior do you spend your time, energy, and attention trying to control all day long? A nice little 1-2 punch, if you will. Very eye-opening. She then goes on to explain that when we feel someone has broken our trust, what has really happened is that they have broken our own expectations. It's our own issue as we are trusting them to be who we want them to be as opposed to who they really are. Kim explains simply that we can always trust human beings to make their choices for one reason and one reason only. That everyone in any given moment will make the best decision and use the best behavior to get what they want. End of story. When you start to look at life through those eyes, it changes everything. It's a brand new way of being in the world. As Kim shared all of this with us, I found myself slipping into that world, marinating in her words. There is so much wisdom here. Everything we do is a choice. Whatever we are doing in that moment, it is because it is our choice. It is how we see ourselves. Perhaps I wouldn't choose to spend every day driving people around to their sporting events, but I do choose to spend each day being a good mother. And it turns out that's a big part of being a mother to my boys. We are doing things to be congruent with how we see ourselves. This is really big, that there's no reason to feel angry or disappointed in someone, that we should just recognize that this is someone I care about and they made the best decision that they knew how in that moment to get what they needed. That was their choice. And yes, sometimes others' choices can hurt us, but it is then our choice with what we want to do about that. Do you want to continue with the relationship and work on it? Do you need to set new boundaries? Do you need to move on? They show you who they are, and you make the decision on what to do about it. It's your choice. Another really big lesson Kim shared with us is that most of misery is self-created. And you guys, her example here is something I don't think I will ever forget. She shared with us the pain she experienced during the Valentine's Day holidays after her husband passed away. I can only imagine the agony of the heart during that time. But Kim came to the realization that the torment she was experiencing was something that she was doing to herself, and she didn't have to sit in it. She made a decision. Instead of focusing on the pain of the day, she would focus on the gratitude. She went on to spend that Valentine's Day writing letters of thanks and appreciation to everyone who helped her and her family during her husband's illness. She flipped her misery into a day of beauty and gratitude that spread far and wide. She realized she doesn't need to feel sorry for herself. And she could either look at all the things she didn't like and all the mistakes that were made, or she could focus on the things that she can do rather than things that she can't. And in doing so, she could make each day feel like she won the lottery. She reminds us that every situation has a positive and negative charge. It's just that our brains are hardwired to negativity. It's our default, but it doesn't have to be that way. Your mind is an operating system, and you can change your programming. when you are going through a painful experience, you don't have to wait for the magic of hindsight to set in. You can go start looking for it right away. Kim calls this looking for the glow, the gifts, the lessons, the opportunities, and the wisdom. Look for them, find them, keep your focus on the glow, and change your life. Forgiveness, another great topic with Kim. Forgiveness for yourself and to others. Finding forgiveness is the ultimate freedom. It releases you from wasted negative energy and sets the prisoner of anger inside of yourself free. It is transformative and literally provides the same level of brainwave activity you would find with a highly accomplished meditation guru. Forgiveness, it is the ultimate win-win process. Find it in yourself to forgive. Kim also offered great advice when dealing with ageism in the workplace. She reminds us that we all need to stay relevant, getting up close and personal with each generation. We need to stay up to date on new technologies in the world around us. If you continue to stay relevant, people will want to continue to hear what you have to say. She also urges you to believe in yourself and your own success. If you do not believe in yourself, how can you expect employers and team members to believe in you? If you find that the belief in yourself is feeling shaky, take a moment to take stock of all of your successes and positive aspects. Build up that pride in your own abilities. It must start with you. She suggests if you're struggling to find that right thing, that perhaps you should take the opportunity to think about what really fired you up as a child. Are there things that you loved that you were talked out of when you were younger? This could be a great time to rediscover your life loves and make a move. Remember, you can do whatever you want to do. It is your life. It belongs to you. Kim herself is doing exactly that. She made a move and is now doing what she loves because she did not listen to the people who said she couldn't. For that part, so am I. That's my wish for you. We should all be so lucky to be doing what we love. Until next time. Thank you for spending time with us on Fresh Blood. If you love this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, or giving us a review. I'm looking forward to connecting with you again on the next episode.